Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. For many of us who have dove into the world of psychedelic medicines, we have experienced the drastic shifts that can happen as a result in our lives. Sometimes these shifts are small, and sometimes they are large. However, what I've come to understand is that in all cases, these shifts allow us to benefit from the shedding of one or more of the masks we have been wearing in our lives, leaving us with a purer, richer sense of who and what we truly are. Today's guest on the show is a woman who understands these shifts well and has experienced them firsthand. From a merely surviving workaholic in the workaholic culture so many of us know today, to a heart-centered pivot into the world of conscious leading as a result of her experiences with psychedelics and other powerful modalities, she is committed to helping her clients transform their businesses into consciously led organizations that break the long-held molds of what corporate life looks like through her business, Dotconnect, which was named one of the fastest growing businesses on the Inc. 5000 list in 2022, and more recently, her book, Now Here. So please help me in welcoming Dom Farnan to the show. Dom, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here with me today. You know, it's so funny. We were just chatting before we hit record about your gardener showing up and Murphy's Law and all these things. And when I was looking in your background, which we're going to get to in a little bit, you know, I know you've gone through some challenges yourself before, especially like after your first time doing ayahuasca and these kind of things. And we're going to get into all that and what you learned from that and everything. But I'd love to start this with asking you how you first became interested in the realm of psychedelics, right? How did these ever stand out to you? Did you have a relationship with them throughout your life? Was it later in life that you decided to try them? Tell me a little bit about that.
I'm a psychedelic newbie. So I discovered psychedelics for healing and therapy in 2021. I went to a non-psychedelic retreat in Tulum for a mastermind that I was in, Leaders Create Leaders. The coach is Gerard Adams. And so at this retreat, I was speaking with one of the women there, who now is a close friend of mine and a medicine woman. We were talking about my marriage. I said, you know, it's challenging right now. I don't want to go to therapy. It's not working. I don't know what to do. You know, maybe we should split. And she said, well, have you ever thought about psilocybin, like a psilocybin ceremony? I had no idea. I'm like, what are you talking about? No. Like, no. And she said, well, I lead these ceremonies in Costa Rica, and maybe you and your husband come down and like really get into some deep work in your relationship. And so I was kind of a straight edge kid, and I was not doing mushrooms in high school or college or any of that stuff. So I had no knowledge of any of this, but lo and behold, my husband was not. And so he knew, and he was like, so you want me to go to Costa Rica to do mushrooms with you to heal our marriage? Interesting. All right, I'm down. Let's go for this. So he was a yes. I was a maybe, but we went and we had our first experience together. It was really beautiful. It was very, very healing, but you know, it wasn't just that one hit wonder. We went back and we did some deeper work in a group setting. And then that kind of started my exploration of the industry and different substances. And then last year was a really expansive year for me where I experimented with a lot of different things. I did do ayahuasca, as you know, amongst other things. And I look at this year as more my integration year. So that's kind of what's been happening so far.
Oh, that's amazing, Dom. You know, it's so fun doing this show because as someone who was introduced to psychedelics in my teenage years, just said no to most of them except cannabis for a long time, and then found their therapeutic effects later on in life and also just their exploratory effects. You know, I really love chatting with other people who were also later bloomers, you know, because I never tried my first psychedelic until I was 23, right? And so I was later bloomer than high school and things like that. I'd already had my club rat days and things. And so, you know, it's fascinating because I really think that For those of us that waited until later years and got through like our partying stages without them and everything, they have the ability to be that much more healing because we don't have to redo any of those old patterns of just like tuning out with them. And, I'm curious for you, like, what was like, especially like as a newbie going down there with your husband, that first ceremony? Do you remember like a point where like something clicked, maybe for both of you, maybe for just you, maybe for just him? Like, is there any part of that ceremony that stands out? Tell me about that.
Yeah. The exact moment when I felt it. So it took a couple hours, I thought, to really start to dig in with me. And I was on what felt like a magic carpet ride. I was like seeing a lot of visuals. It felt relaxing and beautiful. And then the woman I was working with came up to me and she said, how are you doing? And I said, oh, this is so easy. This is chill. Like, this is great. I'm into this. And she's like, no, but how are you really doing? And then I just like went in deep and I started crying. And I saw at that point my 16-year-old self. And I'm like, wow, look at her. She's so beautiful and innocent and pure and like not jaded and not hardened by society. She's just like there. And I really miss her. And so I really cried a lot for this younger version of myself. And at the same time, I felt a lot of anger and rage towards men. So this was a challenging time because my husband's right there next to me, laying next to me. And she kind of looked at him and said, okay, I think we need to go into this really deep. And she needs to like let this rage out. So can you hold space and can you just be and know that whatever comes up is not about you at all. So whatever she says or does is not about you. And he said, okay. So he kind of held my hand and I just like unleashed on how I was feeling. And it was feelings of, shame and guilt and betrayal and abuse and sadness and just all of this pain and sorrow for my younger self, but also just my divine feminine essence. And so I went through that and it felt like forever that I was like screaming and crying, but then I just stopped. It just stopped. And then I kind of regrouped, took a breath and was like, okay, I feel complete. And I feel like I got out a lot of whatever was in there that I didn't even know I was carrying, because generally like that wasn't something that I would think about. That wasn't in my normal day-to-day thinking. It wasn't like I walked around all pissed off at a bunch of men. Like I didn't. So it was shocking to me to go there, but it was very, very healing. And when I explained that to some of the friends of mine, they resonate with that. And they even if they haven't done a psychedelic experience, when I tell them like I felt all this pain and like rage against men, they are like, oh my gosh, yeah, I feel that too. Like I would be right there with you. And, so it's interesting what came up and I still kind of am working through that because a similar instance came up in ayahuasca. It was a little bit different, but it was still around relationships with men. So I've been doing a lot of integration work around that.
I mean, that's fascinating too, because what I've come to understand about our generations is that we're some of the first that actually have enough safety in our lives to start actually diving into some of the other stuff besides just like, do I have a roof over my head? Do I have clean water, food to eat, etc.? So we're dealing with a lot of ancestral stuff too. And, it's been funny. Rachel, my partner, and I, we've been watching, we like never watch Netflix, but we just needed to like, tune out sometimes and just like not talk about work. And so we've been watching this show called Bridgerton. And we've also watched the Queen Charlotte one too. And it's just interesting because I think it's very easy for most men these days to not understand the lineage of like what women have had to go through. And so for all it's like, hey, this is coming through me, but it could not be actually mine. Yeah. It could be just something that I'm now able to process for my entire lineage, and it can be simple. It's not easy though, right? Like, yeah, it's expressing and all these things, but it's funny how exactly what you mentioned in the process you went through. I remember being a kid, being able to do that, right? Being able to all of a sudden just stop, cry, not know why I was crying, just cry. And eventually it would just stop and I'd feel complete and I'd just go on my day. And the mind just gets so in the way. And so I loved you stating that because like, that is like, if I had 3 wishes, one of them would be, can I just like be able to get this out of the way enough to like cry when I need to and just like let it out and not judge it and just keep going.
Yeah, really no, funny. Totally. Like it didn't really trip me up in that the next few days I wasn't overanalyzing it or trying to make sense of it. I was very peaceful and it felt like I had passed this thing. Like I went through this eye of a storm, let it come through me, and then released it. And similarly through ayahuasca, I felt the same thing. I felt like after I went through my eye of the storm and that experience that I left the jungles and like left a piece of depression there. Like I felt so much lighter, and still I'm like wrapping my head around it. I'm getting ready to go to another retreat for ayahuasca soon. And I booked this retreat in January. I'm like, yeah, by June, I'll feel good. I'll be ready. It'll be a year and a half. And then now it's like a week away and I'm like, ooh, okay. I'm getting a little nervous again. And like, I know what I'm going to go see again. And I'm excited, but also just like, 1% like, like most of us are.
Yeah, I think it's healthy. Honestly, like I never get worried about when I'm hosting ceremonies or anything, the people that are like, hey, I'm a little nervous, like I get more nervous about the people that are like cakewalk, like because at least if like, I don't want someone to be like struck with fear so much that they're like paralyzed. Of course, that's like the other side of the polarity. But I think being a healthy amount of nervous, because essentially like that's just being realistic. Like you're about to shed the ego and default mode network and see all parts of yourself, some that you may be aware or may be unaware of, that you either are judging, having shame around, etc. And so the process of loving those parts and accepting them, again, it can be simple, but it's not easy, And so I think that any experienced psychedelic, user, before he or she goes into an experience, understands the potentiality of that experience. Like you could have a beautiful experience that's very like easy and has a lot of ease in it. You could also have a very challenging experience, but it's kind of like this, the analogy I always use to kind of like talk about this dichotomy is after a while, it's kind of like the gym, right? So when you first start going to the gym, especially if you have a trainer that's like pushing you really hard, you're like, oh, this is going to suck, blah, 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 right? And you don't know if you're going to get through it, right? But after you've been going for like a certain amount of time, like, yeah, the workout's still going to be hard, but I'm going to come out of it being really grateful I came and showed up and did it, and that's exactly how I see psychedelics working, is that over time you notice like, yeah, this might be a challenging one, but, as long as I have the right set and setting, the right guide guiding me, the right people around me, I know I'm going to be able to come out of it seeing it happening for me. And so long as I can do that, it can at least allow my nerves to break a little bit.
Yeah, no, fully. I believe that too. I went to an emotional intelligence leadership training in March. It was not psychedelic, but there was so much emotional purge that had happened on the first weekend that prior to me going to the second weekend, I had like a full anxiety attack. Like I was trying to make up excuses to not get on the flight because my body knew, and my body was resisting like going back to do this deep work again. I felt really fragile and I had to go and take myself through a full breath work. And I think I was taking a night flight. So, take a Tylenol PM or something on the flight to just really take the edge off a little bit, because I knew that I was going to go through another emotional cleansing. But I had a friend that was talking about like emotional purge, and she said, I don't look at it as making myself sick or the medicine making me sick. I look at it as making me well. And so I really like that reframe of, no matter what comes up physically or otherwise, that all of it is to make you well, which I loved.
Yeah. It's kind of the idea of like, I'm going to pull out a random analogy here. The universe always speaks to me in weird analogies, but like if you own a car and you want to make it way less, you got to do some stuff that might not look like the most fun to do. You got to take a bunch of seats out, rip a lot of the upholstery out that looks all nice. But if you understand that it's going to help you go faster, which is your desired goal, then you can at least contextualize it as happening for you and also being a good thing. And I think that's kind of similar to how the emotional work works, right? It's like, yes, this is going to be a process. Yes, I am not going to have necessarily expectations of what leaves or how it leaves, etc. But if I can understand that like the desired goal I want, which is a more fulfilling life, the best way out of that and into that is through it, right? Like in being able to go through whatever's standing in my way, then at least we can come out on the other side saying like, okay, I know that was worth it, And again, that simple and easy thing keeps coming back to me. It's like when it's almost like ice baths too, right? Like when I'm talking about doing an ice bath, I'm like, yeah, I love doing ice baths. It's amazing. And I truly do, right? But that doesn't mean that right before the ice bath, I'm not just like silent, like, oh God, here we go again. Like there's this thing. And I think that's how it works with emotional work or anything truly challenging. And I'm not going to speak to this next thing myself because I'm a guy, but I've heard about, this happening with pregnancy, right? Like, I don't know if they're saying it's a genetic thing or something, but with regards to never truly remembering how painful pregnancy is, because genetically it makes women want to do it again, right?
Yeah,
like if they truly remembered how painful it was, it'd be harder to convince yourself to do that again.
Yeah, and you can't even really put it into words. Like when I'm a mom, so I know, but when you are talking about it with people, you're not telling them the bad parts of it. It is a psychedelic experience, like it really is. You're not like focusing on all of the stuff that goes on. You're just focusing on that end result where you have the baby, where you have that thing that's like so lovable and great and luckily smells great and kind of looks like you enough to make you want to do it again.
Yeah. No, it's so accurate, and yeah, it's funny because I think it is like human nature. And I think it does it's probably like something that evolved into us as like a protection mechanism. Like, because if let's say we go through a very challenging psychedelic experience, right? We come out of it being like, wow, that was so worth the payoff. And then we talk to someone else who we know will benefit from it and they're asking us about it. We're not going to be like, well, dude, you're going to puke everywhere. It's going to be absolutely terrible. We're not going to tell them all the stuff. We're going to say, it's going to be challenging, most likely.
Yeah.
Make sure you're in the right set and setting. And afterwards, you're going to feel some sense of enlightenment or feeling better just overall, or at least feeling like you've begun the process of feeling better, And I think that being able to view things as the end result psychologically just kind of helps humans be like, okay, yeah, I know that there's going to be some challenges, but it's worth it,
Yeah. I mean, my husband did his first ayahuasca in August last year, and then he just did his second in February. So he's kind of lapped me. And so I've been telling him, I'm not super nervous, but obviously I'm like prepping mentally. And he's like, yeah, I think your second one's going to be beautiful. Like the second one for me was just so loving and gentle. And, maybe it's not going to be as challenging as the first where you're really getting through some stuff. And so I'm hoping for that. And that's the intention that I'm setting. So we'll see.
Yeah. One of my good buddies, Hamilton Souther, who runs Blue Morpho down in Peru, beautiful ayahuasca center. He gave me, him and I nerd out all the time because one of the things I believe is that healing, if you want to like kind of surmise all of this stuff is like healing work, healing can be light. It can be fun. It can be playful. It can be looked at as the best part of our day. Sure, it can be challenging. It can be hard. But I think that, for me anyway, for a long time, I expected it to be hard. And then I was wondering why it was always so hard. It was like, well, you're unintentionally creating that. But if it's in your unconscious and you're projecting that out, of course, the universe is going to be like, okay, yes, and. And so what he always says is, he's like, when I make an intention, I always end it, ayahuasca, cannabis, etc. Please show me blah, 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 and give me these in the most nurturing, loving, and gentle ways possible. Because I remember when he said it, he was like, yeah, I don't believe the medicine has to be hard work, and I was like, man, I've been saying this for so long, So yeah, I love adding that on because especially like if you're already aware and you've done this before, like I think the second time for me of many things can always be a simpler because at least I understand like, okay, I respect the medicine. I know what the potential is. And that's helped me a lot for sure.
Yeah. I think what made my first experience so challenging was my resistance. Ayahuasca and I were like duking it out. And I kept repeating my affirmations and talking myself back into my body. And my ego was just like strongholding me like, yeah, don't go there. And then ayahuasca was like, yeah, but you need to come here to see this. And we had a kind of battle, it felt like. And then finally, when I surrendered and I just said, okay, I give it up to you. Ayahuasca, show me what I need to see. And, and I just kind of let out this sigh of just exasperation and receiving. And then everything opened up. And it was a whole different experience after that. But I really was battling for a while just with my own resistance.
Yeah. And it's so cool too, because, how we do anything is how we do everything, right? So when I've noticed that in my own experience, I'm like, oh, how often is this happening in my sober state of reality? But maybe I'm too busy. Another defense mechanism the ego plays into to notice it, and that's been really illuminating for me. And, I'm curious for you, Dom, like, because you've connected with psilocybin, you've connected with ayahuasca, and you mentioned some other medicines as well. Like, I always love to ask this question as well. Like, what do you see the differences specifically between psilocybin and ayahuasca to be? Like, how would you personally describe those differences? And then if you want to get into how they relate to any other medicine, you can feel free to go there, but we'll stick with psilocybin and ayahuasca to start.
Yeah. So, I'm not a super experienced ayahuasca person, but I will say that, even in the hardest parts of the ayahuasca experience, it was so beautiful. And we did 3 ceremonies, and the first ceremony was my challenging one. And probably I was in the circle, it was 8 of us, and I had a very hard journey to that peak point where then I surrendered, and then I saw a rebirth. And then I felt like I was laying on my grandmother's lap, and she was telling me, this is what I wanted you to see. And, you can take the weight of the world off your shoulders now, and there's nothing more for you to do. You can just be. And so it was really beautiful. And then the next night, they were singing these beautiful Icaros with us and just chanting just for us one-on-one individually. And I was crying with so much gratitude because it was so stunning to just have all of this love being poured on you, it felt like. And then the third night was just super gentle. But yeah, it's a different experience. I feel like with my psilocybin journeys, they are more visual, but they're very, very gentle. So I haven't really had a challenging psilocybin aside from the first one that I shared with you. But everything after that is like highly visual and interesting. It's very like magic carpet-y, like I'm like zooming through different timelines. I'm seeing different past lives. I'm, seeing so many things. And there's been some experience I've had with such beautiful music that just takes me to these other places. The interesting thing is I did a journey last year in Costa Rica, psilocybin, with 2 of my friends. And one of them was laying next to me, and her experience was completely opposite to mine. So I'm like in my best vibe. I'm like, this is freaking bomb. Like, I love this. It's amazing. The music's great. And then at the end, I look over at her, and she's sobbing, crying, and she's been under the blanket for 5 hours. And she's like, I need to get out of here. I'm getting so many downloads. It's like overwhelming. It's too much, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, wow. I was vibing out. I was like seeing all the spirits. I got all my guides. Like, I felt amazing. So it just goes to show you that, everyone's experience is unique and individual to them and to their energy. And you can all be in the same space and just have very different experiences. But I think for me, like, I feel psilocybin is very gentle. Not that ayahuasca isn't, but, I'm not afraid of any kind of purge or anything like that on psilocybin. And it's a lot more visual. I think ayahuasca is definitely like more potent and just like direct and like strong, and like you're going to do some deep work, and that's okay. And that's beautiful. So they're just a little bit different.
Yeah, that makes sense. And have you, with ayahuasca, were all your ceremonies at night? Were some of them in the daytime? Did you have both? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So all of them were at night, and they were 3 back to back. And the interesting thing is, I don't think that I read the memo that we were doing 3. Like, I thought we were doing 1. And so after the 1, they were like, yeah, the invitation is to do it again tonight and tomorrow. And I'm like, there's no way I cannot do another one. Like, no way after that. I'm still recovering. I don't even know what to make of any of this. But then by the rest of the later in the day, I'm like, yeah, okay, I could go again. All right, let's do it. And I felt more relieved, but peak state in the morning after, they were like, yeah, well, we're getting ready to do this later. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'm good. Like, not going to do it. But ultimately, like, it made sense to have that arc, because had I only had that one experience with that context, it wouldn't have been the full thing for me. I know of people who've only done 1, and however it shows up, but it doesn't ever seem like it really gives them that closure that they need, Like, for me, I felt like I went through a couple different stages, and then I left feeling really complete with that work.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. And, it's funny because I know that feeling very well, of like having gone down the rabbit hole and having been squeegeed from the insides out. And then it's like, okay, round 2. And you're like, what else do I have to give here? Like, and it's so funny. That's why, like, whenever people that don't know about psychedelics are like, aren't you afraid of getting addicted? I'm like, you have no idea how hard that would be.
Yeah,
Like that would take a real sicko to get addicted.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's like in such a different class. And even for people who tend to have addictive, personalities or get addicted to different substances, I think psychedelics are a challenging one because it's not always rainbows and unicorns. It's not always magic carpet rides and amazing. Like, it shows you a lot of different things. And so you have to really be able to be willing to explore and be willing to like contemplate and be willing to integrate and be willing to go in community and talk about this stuff with people and unpack it and just sit with it sometimes, maybe heal it, maybe not heal it. Like there's a lot of stuff that comes with it.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. Yeah, 100%. It's kind of like, how I see it is everyone's looking to manifest and have like the ultimate life that they want. And, you don't need psychedelics for what I'm going to talk about, but I do find that, in the modern day world where people want instant gratification, they don't really have the longest attention spans, things like that. And they also let's face it, we're really busy. And I say busy in quotations because I don't believe busyness to be a good thing necessarily, but I believe it's been sold to us as a good thing. Like if your calendar is packed and you're doing stuff all the time, you're successful in some sense of the word, and I found myself stuck in this before too, right? Of just filling my calendar with stuff to not have to have empty space in my day. And so if you really want forced time alone, right? And even if you're not alone, time alone, psychedelics can give you that for sure. Mm-hmm. Especially if you don't even know why you would want to do it. This is where I find it really helps people, because for a lot of people, they're like, I don't get it. I'm going to hang out alone and I'm going to get in touch with my feelings. I don't get it, right? You allow them to connect with a psychedelic and then you employ and educate them after of that is able to be done, not in the course the same way, but in a very similar way, even without psychedelics. They're okay, well, at least now I've had the experience of what you're talking about, so I can understand from that piece of information. And so what I always find is that there's kind of a 5-stage process to this, right? Psychedelics, they can open up all of these, right? First, self-awareness, and depending on how much you fight it, you cannot make it through these 5 stages, but the more that you surrender, you can make it through. Self-awareness is number 1. Then comes radical honesty with self, right? Being able to say, okay, I'm going to be honest with myself. Then being able to share that honesty with others, whether it be just the group after or society at large. And then after that comes self-acceptance, right? So acceptance of self. And then the final stage is acceptance of the world around you, right? So not getting walked all over and locking boundaries, but saying, oh, when that person did that, I could see how I might have that in me too, right? I'm still not going to allow it in my life necessarily. I'm going to have a conversation about it, but I'm not going to judge them as if I'm above them or anything like that. And when you get those 5 things, now you're able to, it's really like Eminem at the end of 8 Mile. That's how I always think of it. Once you become Eminem at the end of 8 Mile, you now are able to bring in exactly what you want in life, not because you're projecting any certain frequency of exactly what you want, but you're projecting the energy of abundance, right? You love yourself. You love all parts of you. You're honest with yourself. You're accepting of yourself. You realize you're not perfect. You're okay with that. That frequency then puts out exactly the people, places, and things that you're meant to have in highest alignment. And I think that when I've heard your stories specifically, and we're going to get into this in a second with ayahuasca and things like that, it really has seemed like that type of journey for you, right? And, with all the work you do and all the people you serve and all those kind of things, it's so beneficial to have those experiences because you get to then educate and share and be able to be radically honest and all these things. And that's one of the things I wanted to dive into real quick is I saw when I was doing some research on you, that story about you doing ayahuasca. And I wanted to bring attention to this because I know for me, this is one of the biggest lessons I had to learn myself. But I think this is what a lot of people don't understand is that psychedelics, like, yes, there is part of the quote unquote work that is the ceremony itself. But really, it's the after part, the integration part, which really arguably never ends, but we can look at it as a period anyway. After that, we can really integrate those PEAK peak experiences and the magic we felt into our day-to-day life. So I'd love if you could share your experience with integration first off, and now how you view it now, having had that experience.
Yeah. So I think integration is so important. And I think I'm still integrating. I was just telling the story of my first ayahuasca on Sunday, and like new insights came to me as I was telling the story and as I've processed it with other experiences I've had and other inner work and healing I've done in the last year and a half. And I'm also just thinking about going, as I go back into ceremony again soon, how I'm going to show up and what's going to happen after, because I'm now further along on this journey. So I think it's important that you go into it kind of eyes wide open and know that chances are you will forever be changed, and you're excited and you're open to being changed. And for me, I was very much like, something's got to give because none of this is working. And so I'm willing to go to the depths of my soul. And it was interesting because at one point in my journey, I left the circle. I walked outside because I felt really hot. And then I kind of collapsed where I was. And then I'm like, in my ego, I'm like, damn, I'm going to die right now. I think I'm dying. Maybe I'm dead. Maybe I'm in Peru and they're going to have to ship my body back to my family. Like, I had all these like weird thoughts in my head. And I kept thinking, I did this for you guys. I did this for my family. I did this for my team. I did this for myself, but like, I'm here doing it. And then I was like, damn, I'm proud of you, girl. Look at you doing all this hard work. But it was this whole like range of emotions. And even so, afterwards, when we did circle up, and one of the last days of the experience, maybe a week later, we were still in Peru. I remember like crying and being scared of coming back to my life. Like, how am I going to show up in the world? Are people going to accept me? Will my husband still love me? Will I still love him? I don't know. There's so many things that are going through my head. And really just sitting with that and like wondering where that fear was coming from or how I was going to then bring it back in my life. And so it's funny because, I got back and life was life. And I talked to one of my friends, Brandon Collingsworth, and he was like, yeah, so how's your integration going? And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of hard. I'm like kind of binge drinking and this is weird. I'm like, I feel good, but I feel weird. And he's like, yeah, because this shit's called life ayahuasca. Like, this is, like, it's not just you being in ceremony and the medicine. Like, now you're just aware of a lot of things that are present in your life. And so how do you navigate that? And that's true. I was talking to another coach about it today. Like, once you're aware, you can't not be aware. Once you have your self-awareness kick in, it's not like it just goes away and you're like, yeah, I'm going to turn that off today. I'm going to not care, because that's not how it goes. It's almost like really on overdrive, right? So that's kind of the beautiful thing of all of this. And I just think the work continues. I think it's really important to have people in your community that you can talk to about your experience that's in a guilt-free, shame-free, judgment-free way. Because the stuff that you hear is a range of a lot of things, right? And there's some common threads sometimes, and you're like, oh yeah, that was a good trip. And then sometimes it's like, damn, all right, let's like unpack this a little bit. And how can I support you? And what do you want to share? What do you not want to share? And just having people that you can lean on, especially even if you're like not doing psychedelics yet and you're curious. Don't go overly research everything and go down the rabbit hole, because you're going to see exactly what you want to see and what you've programmed your mind to find for you. But talk to people that you trust. Do a little bit of research. That was like how I was before I did Bufo for the first time. I remember I'm like, that sounds awful. I don't want to like go to the cosmos and back in 1 second. Like, that's scary to me. Like, there's no way I'll ever do this. And then as I was talking to the maestro, she's like, don't do any research and just show up on Tuesday at 11 and we'll see you. And that's it. Just show up. Like, do not do one thing with it. I'm like, okay. And that worked for me, because had I gone down a rabbit hole, may not have done it. And it was a really beautiful experience with that substance as well.
Yeah. It's so funny you've done Bufo, because out of all the psychedelics I've connected with, there's no words for any of them. There's seriously no words for that one. Like, it's just like, how do I even attempt to make words out of that? And, it's funny too, because you were talking about how like self-awareness doesn't go away. And it's the classic, storyline of like, once Pandora's box is opened, there's no putting it back in, and I think that is the dark night of the soul that a lot of people experience after connecting with a psychedelic, especially if they haven't been the biggest meditator or anything like that, which many people are not by the time they go down. That's kind of what kickstarts. It's what kickstarted my journey into spirituality. And, there's just a lot of like, I don't even know how to place this. And now I have all these things and I didn't even know I had parts, and now they're here and I can see them and I can feel them. And that can be really challenging. And, I always tell everyone that, when you're connecting with psychedelics, it's kind of like, it can be the most challenging part, because if you've had a dark room for a long time, aka like dark corners of your psyche, and then you connect with something that throws light into those dark corners for the first time in a long time, what the first thing you're going to notice is how messy the room is, or how dusty it is, or how like, I don't remember ever arranging this furniture in this particular way. Like, how did this happen? And that can be the part that's the most challenging. And it's very similar to like, when I was a kid, my least favorite day of the year was when my dad decided randomly, I don't know if he ever actually had a day, but I was a kid and didn't pay attention to calendars, when spring cleaning would happen, because the hardest part was walking down and then just seeing what you had to clean. As soon as you started, it wasn't nearly as hard, because now you knew like, well, I just keep doing what I'm doing and eventually it's going to be done. It might take longer than I expected, but it's going to be done. And with psychedelics and, development and trauma, I don't know if it's ever meant to be done, but at least when you start doing it, like, okay, well, now I have the ability to know what this stuff is, when it comes up, how to tackle it, and the right people to go to, I think having those things can help a lot too.
Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's about your relationship with self. It's about who you be. And I think for me, all of this has just expanded my relationship with myself. And it's been so like amazing, because for the longest time working in corporate for 20 years and all of that, I felt very conditioned and I felt very robotic, and I did not tap into my intuition and into my spirit and into my soul. And I didn't hear myself. I buried myself with all of the things, the stuff, the material things, the titles and the labels and all of that. And so for me, this has just been such a beautiful awakening of like, oh, there's my little soul again. Perfect. Love you. Missed you. Here you are. You're coming back. And it's just been really nice.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's like in Star Wars when like the Millennium Falcon kicks in and the entire thing works, and you get to see like the majesticness of that old ship, right? And you get to understand why Han Solo loves it. I don't know where these analogies come from. They just come out of the ether. But like, it's really cool because, we hear these things intellectually, right? That we're a soul having a human experience, that we are eternal, that we're divine, right? And if people listening are like me, like for a long time, I thought I understood things like that because I understood them intellectually. So I could repeat them, I could define them. And so therefore I knew them. But the greatest thing ever is realizing the depth to which you will never fully know those things, and to the degree where you actually realize that knowing things is not really as all cracked up as it's meant to be, right? Like being able to realize like, wow, there's this part of me that is infinite in nature. And there's this part of me that's been alive for thousands upon thousands of years, in addition to this part of me that's infinite. And I'm not going to necessarily fully remember what I was before I came here. But now I have this awareness of the enthrallment of mystery around me. Like it, to me, like connecting with psychedelics and tapping back into my innate divine nature as an eternal being allows me to feel like it's Christmas Eve constantly. And I'm like 8 years old, So I have like this ability for like, is Santa Claus even real? I don't know yet, right? What am I going to get? I don't know. What am I going to do tomorrow? Nothing else except play with all the new stuff I got, right? Yeah. So like there's all these feelings kind of coinciding that are there almost all the time, because now I know that I don't know. And I think that one of the thirst traps the modern day world gets us in is not only that we need to know things, but that we do know things, right? Oh, we drive the same way to work every day. We've been working at the same job for so many years. So I know what the drive's going to be like. I know where I'm going to get stuck in traffic. I know what food I like. I know what food I don't like. And it kind of happens like subtly over time. But what happens is the magic, gets lost in life, right? Or at least we stop looking for the magic in life.
Yep.
And I think things like psychedelics can be that just huge pattern interrupt to be like, whoa, I was full of shit and didn't even know it.
Yeah.
And I've never been happier to know that.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And I know that there's still, a big opportunity for a rebrand in psychedelics, and people who are, like my parents' age in their mid 60s who have, lived through different times and different perceptions and have their own ideas of what it is. Although I will say my mom's definitely more psychedelic curious. So I'm excited for her to, get beyond her microdosing journey and get into something a little bit bigger when the timing feels right for her. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I was talking to friends the other night who were talking about, their young kids that need to go on different medications and how they don't really even know or hear about anything alternative to what a doctor may prescribe to you. And they don't know about, there's microdosing options or other things that you can explore. Even other somatic therapies is not necessarily even any kind of psychedelic yet that you can do for your own mental health and wellness. Like I had a psychedelic breathwork session with 0 substances that felt like an LSD trip before I even knew what LSD was. So like there are things that'll take you there if you are curious but don't fully want to go there yet.
Definitely. And, whenever anyone brings up breath work, I always have to make a mention that, have you ever tried breath work while on psychedelics?
Ooh, good question. No, I haven't.
I feel like it's my gift to share with everyone. What I will say is that it can be very intense, especially with like high doses of LSD or psilocybin.
Yeah.
MDMA, on the other hand, it is the craziest thing you will ever experience. And, for everyone listening, of course, be careful with this. Don't do anything crazy. You don't need a lot. It's not something you need to do holotropic breathing for. This can be something as simple as just really focusing on 10 slow diaphragmatic breaths. And on the last one, just holding in, not even squeezing, just holding in, and then just coming fully into presence and just witnessing the magic that occurs because you have more DMT coming through your system. With MDMA, you have more serotonin and dopamine mixing in there. I mean, there's so many different aspects of things mixing together that what I found is like, for someone like your mom, let's say she's like, well, I don't want to do something big, but I want something bigger. What you could potentially do is try like, instead of just a microdose, maybe like a half, like a 0.5 dose instead of a 0.1, and then do some slow breath work, or something like that. That way she can have the bigger experience, but it can also go away in 5 seconds.
Oh, I like
if she wants
that.
it to stop, it can go away.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation. I think we might try that because we were talking about possibly doing a psilocybin journey together, or one where I kind of am the trip sitter and, watching over the situation. But I like that better. I think that would be a lower barrier to entry for sure.
Yeah. Like I find that like, if you can teach her like even like my buddy Chris does this sonic breathing, and it's kind of just like nice big inhales, nice big exhales, not trying to go for it like Wim Hof or holotropic, but really just focusing on quality of breath. And I usually do it laying down just because it's, again, whenever you're doing breath work, and I'm sure you know this, but, it's like whenever you're doing breath work, you don't want to worry about falling over. Like things like that can really happen. It's happened to me before. Luckily, I was just sitting when it happened, but it's happened to some friends, like falling off bar stools and stuff. And it's just, not the thing you want to worry about. So being able to do that, can to like some nice music too, like some frequency healing, can just be a beautiful experience. And then if she likes that, that might be a thing of like, okay, let's try a gram next time and just try that, and that's like a nice, easy way to kind of leverage people in.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome, Dom. And one thing I'm curious too is psychedelics and creativity, right? Because you're an author, right? You do a lot of different stuff. You're an entrepreneur. Like, I think that this is one of the power zones of psychedelics. And the cool thing is that in my experience, especially with cannabis, which is the main medicine I focus on in my work, like, a big part of what all these medicines are here for, as I choose to believe, is that they're here to remind us of what we can already do, but maybe we blocked ourselves with an unconscious story, a limiting belief, etc. So talk to me a little bit about your experience with regards to psychedelics and creativity. Did you notice an uptick? Did you need that at that time? Like, how do you think that helped you, or did it help you with regards to creativity? And then did you find that valuable in business and life in general?
Yeah. So last year in 2022, when I was on this exploration of sorts, experimenting with a lot of different things, high dose and low dose and microdose and single type of experiences, I wrote my book. So it definitely helped unlock my ability to create. Prior to that, I started writing my book in 2020. I wrote about a 100-page manuscript, and then I was blocked and I didn't write anything until last year. And then I wrote between February and August, and the book came out in March of this year. And so it definitely helped unlock me there. And I will say that even in experiences in my business with my COO, there's been opportunities where I've been like, hey, I think we need to go out to the desert and do LSD and just like really hammer out some stuff. Like, let's get some ideas out of our head and onto paper, and, or just riff off each other and see what we can dream up. And lucky for me, I mean, she was more on the psychedelic path than I was before, and I didn't even know it. So that's been really interesting. I think when it comes to like leading my team, I was also leading my team and my company. We were growing massively last year as I was in this state of exploration. And it definitely expanded my ability to hold the vision that I had, enroll people in the vision, grow our team, enhance our culture, focus on bringing consciousness into our culture and infusing it in an intentional way. And yeah, I think it just expanded me in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, that's exactly what I found. And, I love that method of like, taking some LSD in the desert. I find LSD, it is like the best medicine I found, maybe besides cannabis. Cannabis works really well, but LSD is like a rocket ship there, where like, if you want creativity, if you want like HIGHdeas to the max, LSD is just like, in my experience, and again, guys, you always know I'm not recommending this to anyone, but in my personal experience, it is the medicine to go on if you want HIGHdeas and you want think about it. It is the psychedelic of Silicon Valley, right? Where they're all about like inventive type mindset, innovation, things like that. And if they find it useful, there's probably a reason why. Like they, and again, like different doses will do different things, but I've always had some of my most wild ideas always come out during LSD. So it's very interesting you mentioned that.
Yeah, I've just had some of the best conversations I think I've ever had. I've only done LSD high dose a couple of times, but they've been really beautiful experiences and lots of love and laughter and like just deep, deep conversations, deep introspection. Can be social, but you can also be in your own experience. And yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's, and it's pure laughter medicine as well. It's one of those medicines that I've had experiences where literally I'm like laughing so hard and I'm like, laughter is kind of like crying. And then I start crying and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not even sad.
Yeah.
What's happening? And it's really just an interesting molecule, to work with. And, I've had some experiences where, again, LSD is also the medicine that I've said this before in the show, but it bears repeating. It's the medicine that I've never heard anyone say, I took LSD and it was exactly what I expected. Like every time I take it or I have anyone tell stories about taking it, it was either more than they expected, they accidentally took too much. Like there's always something interesting that happens during that experience. Have you found that too with LSD?
Yeah, no, of course. Like the first time we did it was last summer here at our house in California. And there was, it wasn't really a thought. We just got it, had it, did it. And it was an interesting, windy road. And I was like, yeah, I'm not sure if I like this, but also I don't like being home where all my, the TV is. And like, that was kind of challenging. So the intention for the next time that we took it, we were out in the desert, and that was just a vibe because everything was so cool. And like the landscape was cool. We had rocks, we had cactus, we had stars, we had the perfect set and setting. And so that was just, like 12 hours of beautiful rolling waves and lots of laughter and cuddle puddles. And just, we'd go on our adventures out walking around and then, all come cuddle each other and go back out. And it was just so fun and beautiful. And, it was interesting because I had a text thread going on. I'm like, so for my birthday, I want to go to the desert and do LSD. Who's in? And it was like immediately everybody was like, yep, I'm there. Let's do it. And so I never seen people reply so quickly to a text.
Yeah, it's like, don't threaten me with a good time, twist my arm.
Yeah.
That is too funny. It's funny too, because I found that too, and I'm glad you brought that up. Like, we talk about set and setting a lot, and I think that for a lot of people, like, their house is probably not the best setting, right? Because it's embodied with the energy that if you work from home, there's that there. If you have family, that's there. Stresses, bills, like just things like that. And also, like, if you've been where you've been at for even a little while, like, there's always the chance. And again, with LSD, this stuff always happens, that someone just decides to drop by because they were in the neighborhood. And now you have to try to avoid that situation, which is never as hard as it actually seems. It's just that the thinking about what to do is the challenging part, just not having any of that interference is so great. Like, for me, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, because I'm an East Coaster, like, those are the places where, especially Maine, like, you go way up to like Bar Harbor, have an experience up there, and you can get some lobster after and all the good stuff. So yeah, it's really funny.
Yeah, fully.
Yeah. And I'm curious for you, like, what is your next intention, if you have it laid out, for ayahuasca coming up? Like, do you have any ideas that have been flying around about what you might want to focus on during this time?
Yeah, so I'm in an interesting time in my life and my career where the company that I led and owned and was growing is not anymore. And so we've kind of wrapped things up on that front. And so I've created a lot of spaciousness for my life and my calendar for the next 3 months. And my intention is just to go. I want a light and loving journey. I want to have a clear idea of my, higher purpose calling and what my message is to bring forward to the world. I know what it is, but, I want to get that kind of confirmation and have the conversation with ayahuasca and feel armed and ready to do that after the experience. But I'm also just taking some time. Like, it's going to be nice because I get to go in a week, and I'm going to take some time for myself where I'm not rushing back to run a 100-person company and go to Zooms and do all of that. And, for me right now, that's what it's about. I'm finally going to really live and embody the values that I have said are important to me and show up as the conscious leader that I have told the world that I am. But it feels strange because I, was a workaholic, and even in my consciousness, I still worked a lot. And so it feels weird to not be busy working, but I know that other things will be percolating in the background. And so I'm in this kind of, reimagining what my life will be, period.
I love that. And I think it's so beneficial to talk about this stuff too, because as a recovering busy person, right, myself, and running a company, it's like, it's so easy to get into overachiever mode. And that's not necessarily bad, but it's just nice to have the context of what the opposite is. And space is so necessary to spawn creativity. And, I know for me, it was right when the pandemic started that I had started my business right before. And then when that happened, it was like, fantastic, I got all this space now. And I didn't know it at that time. It wasn't planned, obviously, or anything. But looking back, I'm like, wow, that space really allowed me to get clear on what I wanted without any outside influence, without any distractions, nothing. It was beautiful. And I think that, like, if that's one thing that time period, whatever we choose to believe or what it happened, showed us, was that how many people needed some space in their life and how beneficial it was. And also how challenging it was for a lot of other people to have space in their life. It was kind of both sides being seen at once. So yeah, I love that idea of, having the space in your life now to really just center in and ask, like, what next?
Yeah.
Who do I choose to be? Who am I? Where am I going? Where do I come from? Et cetera.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Yeah. Well, Dom, this has been absolutely amazing. I've loved being able to riff with you, share your story with the listeners. Where can people find out more about you, the book, and all the things you got going on right now?
Yeah, amazing. So you can visit my website, domfarnan.com, and you can download a couple free chapters if you want a little taste. But yeah, you can Google the book. It's called Now Here, A Journey from Toxic Boss to Conscious Connector. And I'm on Instagram at I am Dom Farnan.
Oh, I love that. And Dom, I have one last question that I like to ask everyone. And that question is this. Let's say someone listens to this conversation and they're interested in psychedelics in their own life. what is the one piece of advice you would suggest to them to allow them to use discernment in choosing whether these medicines are right for them?
Yeah, I would say, leverage resources like How to Change Your Mind on Netflix or Third Wave, right? Or my friend Corey's company, Retreat Microdose. There's a lot of different communities. You don't always have to have a big experience. You can go low and start slow and explore and experiment. And, there's no right or wrong answer to it. So whatever you feel called to, follow that calling. I know for me, when it came to ayahuasca, I was a no for a long time. And then I felt a calling, and then it was a yes. And 6 months later, I was in Peru. So, what works for me may not work for you. What works for you might not work for the next person. So just trust your intuition, do a little bit of research, but don't overkill it on that. And just follow your calling.
Yes, I love that. I always say, if you follow your intuition, if you follow your heart, you'll never end up in the wrong place, but you might end up in a much more interesting place or around certain people or around certain things than you ever thought was possible. Okay, guys, no matter how many stories I hear surrounding people's experiences with psychedelic medicines and the shifts that take place in their lives as a result, I am still continually blown away with each new one I hear. And Dom's story is the latest in a series of stories that have allowed my heart and inspiration to expand as a result of hearing. For anyone looking to keep up with Dom, purchase her book, and connect with her, hop over to the show notes of this episode, where I will have all the details on how to do just that. Dom, thank you so much for taking the time to riff with me on the show today, for being a leading voice in the movement towards more conscious living and leading, and for being an amazing source of inspiration for so many in their lives. And until next time, my friend, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.